Hi, Premier Opposition Leader. My name's Tammy. I'm a member of the Jewish community here in Brisbane, and I'd like to know, based on what we've seen happening in the communities, in the universities in Queensland and around the world, what do you both plan to do to tackle the rising anti-Semitism and hate and for the safety of your Jewish community members?
Let's go to the Opposition Leader first. Thank you.
Call it out. Call it out when we see it. And some of the behaviour has been abhorrent. And we're harking back to an era of a century now. We haven't seen anti-Semitic behaviour like this in Queensland or in this country for over a century. And foreign policy is something that's dealt with in a different parliament. But as leaders, we have to call out that behaviour. We're better than that as Queenslanders, and we should be doing all we can to unite the state in every way, shape or form. So when behaviour is like that, we must call it out.
Premier.
I think this is something David and I can agree on. There's no place in Queensland for hate, for violence, for anti-Semitism, and I'll call it out too.
Let's hear from Mick now with the next question. Thanks, Mick.
Hi, good evening, Premier. Good evening, Opposition Leader. First of all, good luck tonight. I'm personally live in Brisbane. My kids live in Sunshine Coast. Due to the fact that my work and profession, I can't find a job, obviously, in Sunshine Coast. Southeast Queensland, we have a big problem with the traffic between Brisbane and Gold Coast and between Brisbane and Sunshine Coast. In fact, there is only one road that leads between Brisbane and Sunshine Coast, and there is no public transportation. Would your administration or any of you two administration will be open to considering a privately funded initiative to enhance the state road as a solution to these problems? And just as a background quickly, I lived in Japan, I lived in Germany, and I'm born in Israel, and I saw an alternative roads that can be implemented. The question is if you will encourage a privately funded.
Thank you, Mick. Let's hear from the Premier and the Opposition Leader.
That's a great question, Mick, and it's one that's close to my heart. I live at Mango Hill, so I commute half of the trip from Brisbane to the Sunshine Coast every day. We have that big upgrade coming from the Gateway Merge north to Boundary Road, which is going to fix that bottleneck. And on the southern leg down to the Gold Coast, we have the second M1 under construction, the Coomera connector. We do have a plan to work with our investment company, QIC, to deliver a new tunnel road from the Airport Link tunnel to Castledine to around Beams Road. Well, we're going to use our state investment company, but similar theory. And then, of course, at both ends, there's public transport solutions too. So Gold Coast Faster Rail, the extension of Gold Coast Light Rail, Sunshine Coast Heavy Rail, and of course making them all 50 cent has made a lot of people rethink whether they want to battle the highway or take the train. So that's our plans for those two legs.
There's been a real shortage of infrastructure in Queensland for a generation, and we do have to get cracking. And the biggest impediment standing in our way is one militant union called the CFMEU. And unfortunately, they're far too influential in Queensland. They have a big role in selecting who the government of the day is at the moment. And if government changes, I'll owe my loyalty to you, not to the union bosses. As a result of their militance, productivity continues to fall. And the Premier mentioned that Coomera connector. That's a really important project. It started as a second motorway to the Gold Coast. Well, it started as a 6-lane road at $1.5 billion. It's now a 4-lane road at $3.1 billion. And I look at other projects, and we're talking about heavy passenger rail. We've got to get that all the way through to the CBD at Maroochydore. Otherwise, it'll create a car park at Caloundra. Premier's right. He spoke about that tunnel. That's got to happen. There is no shortage of infrastructure demands for this place. But you need to understand that Queensland is going to continue to be a place where people want to move to, want to invest. But good governments plan ahead. And we need to start doing that, generational planning. We need to make sure that we protect your lifestyle and make sure that when people come here, there are opportunities for their kids to afford a home and for them to be able to drive around. And that takes planning and it takes vision. We haven't seen that for a long time.
Mr Christofouli, before we go to Kimberley with her question, I want to ask you both this one in relation to the 50-cent fares the Premier touched on. You're saying you're going to reduce debt, reduce taxes, you're going to keep those fares. How is it sustainable, a 50-cent fare for public transport? I know it's popular, and it's probably unpopular to ask this question, but on a permanent basis. How is that sustainable?
Kieran, we justify it on the basis that it can ensure that people are using an asset that's already there and maximising the most out of it. I've always been someone as opposition leader that I look at ideas, and if it's something to me that makes sense, I don't care where they come from. And this is one of them that we looked at and we thought, yeah, that makes sense. What we want to see, though, is to make sure that the frequency of those services are reliable and that they're safe and they're frequent. And that's an important part of it. But we look at it this way. If we can encourage people onto public transport, that means that you don't have that really convergence of capital all at one time in one location. So it made sense to us, and so we've backed that, and we think it makes sense into the long term.
I think this is something you had thought of when you were going to uni, as on the train on the way in and so on. But same question, or similar. When you look at the running costs per trip, isn't it about $19 from the analysis I saw for every trip? How do you cover that shortfall with 50-cent fares?
You're right, Kieran. This is something I've wanted to do ever since I was catching the train from Petrie. I grew up in the outer suburbs, and it never made any sense to me that we charge the people who have to travel the furthest the most. I think it makes it harder for people to get to work and to education, and they're the people we most want to get off the roads and onto public transport. When you look at the amount we invest in capital for these things, what we were recouping in fare revenue was a fraction. So the 6-month trial cost $150 million compared to the tens of billions of dollars that we've spent building the train lines and the trains and everything else. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to me to get people using that infrastructure, get them off the roads and save them a lot of money in the process.